The Talking Parrot. Once upon a time, an old woman named Granny Martha lived alone in a small village. She was kind, but very forgetful. One day, she decided to buy a pet for company. She went to the pet shop and saw a beautiful parrot. "This parrot is special," the shopkeeper said. "It can talk." Excited, Granny Martha bought the parrot and took it home. But after a week, the parrot didn't say a single word. Granny Martha was disappointed. She went back to the shop and complained, "You lied. This parrot doesn't talk." The shopkeeper thought for a moment and asked, "Did you talk to the parrot?" Granny Martha looked shocked. "What? It has to talk first. I'm not going to start a conversation with a bird," the shopkeeper laughed. "You have to talk to him first. Then he will repeat what you say." Granny Martha went home and started talking to the parrot every day. "Hello, Polly," she said. "Good morning. How are you?" Days passed, but still the parrot remained silent. One morning, Granny Martha was making tea when she stubbed her toe on the table and shouted, "Oh no, my toe!" Suddenly, the parrot loudly repeated, "Oh no, my toe!" Granny Martha's eyes widened. She was so surprised that she forgot the pain. From that day on, Polly the parrot never stopped talking, especially when Granny Martha was angry. And so, the whole village started calling the parrot Granny's Echo because it always repeated whatever she said. Moral of the story: be careful what you say. Someone might be listening. The Lazy Farmer and His Clever Donkey. Once upon a time, there was a lazy farmer named Jack. He had a donkey named Bob, who was smarter than him. One day, Jack loaded Bob with sacks of salt and headed to the market. On the way, they had to cross a river. Bob accidentally slipped and fell into the water. When he stood up, Jack noticed something strange. The sacks had become much lighter. Jack scratched his head. "Wait a minute. The salt dissolved in the water. This is great." The next day, Jack loaded Bob with even more sacks of salt. But Bob was no fool. As they reached the river, he pretended to slip again. The salt dissolved, and Bob happily walked with a light load. Jack was annoyed. "You sneaky donkey, you tricked me." The next day, Jack came up with a plan. This time he loaded Bob with sacks of cotton instead of salt. As expected, Bob pretended to slip into the river again, but when he got up, uh-oh! The cotton had soaked up all the water and had become heavier than before. Bob groaned under the weight. Jack laughed. "Not so smart now, are you?" From that day on, Bob never tried to trick Jack again. Moral of the story: tricks don't always work. Sometimes they backfire. The King and His Long Nose. There was once a king who was very proud of his looks, but one morning when he woke up, he screamed, "Ah! My nose! It's huge!" His nose had mysteriously grown twice its size overnight. The king called the best doctors. One doctor measured his nose and said, "Your Majesty, this is the longest nose I have ever seen." The king shouted, "Off with his head! Bring me a doctor who will fix this." The next doctor came and said, "Your Majesty, your nose is, a little bigger than before." The king yelled, "A little? Off with his head!" Finally, a clever old man stepped forward. He looked at the king's enormous nose and said, "Your Majesty, your nose is perfect. In fact, I have never seen such a majestic nose before." The king yelled, "A little? Off with his head. Finally, a clever old man stepped forward. He looked at the king's enormous nose and said, "Your Majesty, your nose is perfect. In fact, I have never seen such a majestic nose before." The king smiled. "Really?" The old man continued. "Of course. This is not a big nose. It is a royal nose, a nose fit for the greatest king." The king beamed with pride. "Ah, yes, I have a royal nose." From that day on, the king was no longer embarrassed about his nose. Instead, he walked around proudly, showing it off. Moral of the story: sometimes a little flattery is the best medicine. The talking clock. One day, a man named Harry went to a fancy hotel. He noticed a huge golden clock in the lobby. Curious, he asked the receptionist, "What's special about this clock?" The receptionist smiled and said, "It's a talking clock. Just hit it, and it will tell you the time." Harry was amazed. He tapped the clock lightly. Nothing happened. He knocked a little harder. Still nothing. Annoyed, he punched the clock. Suddenly, a loud voice from the next room shouted, "Hey! It's 2:30 in the morning. Stop hitting the wall." Moral of the story: sometimes things aren't what they seem. The smart barber. A rich but foolish man named Tom went to a barber. While cutting his hair, the barber said, "Sir, I can tell how smart someone is just by feeling their head." Tom laughed. "Oh, really? Then tell me, am I smart?" The barber touched Tom's head, then nodded seriously. You are very intelligent. Your head is full of wisdom." Tom grinned. "I knew it." After Tom left, another customer asked, "Why did you lie to him?" "Everyone knows he's not smart." The barber laughed. "If I had told him the truth, do you think he would have paid me?" Moral of the story: sometimes a little kindness or flattery is good for business. The magic wish. One day, a poor fisherman caught a magical fish. The fish spoke, "Please let me go. I will grant you one wish." The fisherman thought for a moment and said, "I wish my wife was young and beautiful forever." The fish granted his wish. When the fisherman returned home, he found his wife looking exactly the same. She was happy and full of energy. A week later, the fisherman went back to the sea and called the fish. "Hey, my wife is young, but I'm still old. Change me too." The fish sighed. "Fine. One more wish." The fisherman thought for a moment and said, "Make me younger, but not too young. Just enough so I look like her husband, not her son." The fish granted the wish. When the fisherman returned home, his wife looked at him and said, "Oh no, now you look too young. People will think I'm your mother." The fisherman groaned, "Oh no, I need one more wish." But the fish was gone. Moral of the story: be careful what you wish for.